We're joined now by Rob O'Donnell, a former NYPD homicide detective with nearly 30 years of public safety experience. Rob also serves on the board of directors for the Pipehitter Foundation. And Cully Stimson, senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He's one of the nation's leading experts on homeland security and crime control. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
So, Rob, let me begin with you. You've been a part, in one way or another, of a lot of terrorist attacks in the United States. You were there, you responded to the 93 World Trade Center bombing, you were part of the response to 9/11. When you had a terrorist incident at Fort Dix, you were there. You even had your son call you from Pensacola, Florida, a place I'm familiar with. I went to officer candidate school there during an attack. In the past, when people thought about terrorism in the United States, they often thought of it as an attack that was sponsored by a foreign adversary or lone wolves carrying out this kind of terrorist attacks. Now, our police are facing a threat from Antifa. How did the Antifa threat grow? How has this changed? And why is it so important that we're supporting law enforcement to address this new threat?
Well, how it grew is the stand down mentality of the cities that it's grown in, where they've allowed them to flourish, where they haven't quashed these Antifa type uprisings, from the start. They've never set that tone that this is not acceptable, so it's grown as acceptable in these cities and it's spreading nationwide. The infrastructure behind them is great. The funding behind them is great, and it's allowed them to transport themselves from city to city to bring this anarchy. And it doesn't take many. I mean, you can have a peaceful protest of 1,000 people. If you have 12 or 15 or 20 hardened anarchists that come to create havoc, they're going to monopolize on that situation to do so. And we've seen time and time again how they're doing this in our cities across the nation.
Yeah, and Cully, let me turn to you on that really important point that Rob made. I mean, you've served on the front lines of this as a prosecutor. You've also have a perspective from having served in the Department of Defense, in the Pentagon. One of the things that we've seen is that we've had a lot of prosecutors who, when police officers bring in criminals with evidence, people who've been committing arson, who've been looting, who've been rioting, you've had a lot of prosecutors who've turned around and then sent folks right back out onto the streets. Talk with us a little bit about what that does and the role of prosecutors in supporting our law enforcement officers.
Yeah, so the prosecutor occupies a unique position in the entire criminal justice system. They are the gatekeepers to the courtroom. So if police do their job, which some mayors in these liberal cities are not even allowing the police to do their jobs, arrest people and have probable cause to arrest them and bring a good case to a prosecutor, some of these rogue prosecutors, or what they call progressive prosecutor offices, have non-prosecution memos where entire classes of crimes are off the menu. Rachel Rollins, the Boston elected rogue prosecutor, has 15 particular crimes: wanton malicious destruction of property, possession with intent to distribute, breaking and entering, and all sorts of other crimes. So does Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. So does the rogue prosecutor in Portland, Oregon. The list goes on and on. So they're line deputies, they're line prosecutors who are supposed to follow the law, simply are not allowed to charge them. So they're essentially, Eric, usurping the power of the legislature. They're violating the separation of powers by not enforcing the law as written. They're not faithfully executing the law. And so those charges just don't get filed. And these thugs and criminal elements can just go right back out on the street with impunity.
And let's remind all of our viewers that prosecutors take an oath, just like you took an oath as a Navy officer that you were going to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. These prosecutors take an oath to uphold the law, and when they fail to do so, they are violating that oath. Cully, give us also some historical perspective as you think about the history of the country and you think about where we're at today. What does this assault on law enforcement actually mean for the Republic, and why is it so important that people get back in and start supporting our law enforcement officers?
Well, first off, I think we were probably all in agreement that the vast majority of Americans are patriotic and they support
Yes.
law enforcement. But there's a growing cancer in our country, frankly, that believes law enforcement is systemically racist, that they are the problem. And when you put it in a historical perspective, this assault on law enforcement is an assault on the United States, because we are founded on the rule of law. We have a written constitution with enumerated rights that we as citizens have. So if you're assaulting the very people that are supposed to enforce the rule of law, you're enforcing the concept of a free America bound by a federal constitution and 50 state constitutions. That's how dire this is.
Yeah, and Rob, from your perspective, look, you're often a contributor to a lot of different law enforcement journals, things that police officers are reading. What are the key messages that you think our officers need to be hearing, both from the general public and from our political leaders? And we've only got a little bit of time left, in 30 seconds or less. The key messages you think they need to be hearing.
Sure. With policing and community relations, there's no doubt a conversation needs to be had. But we need to start that conversation from a place of fact, not fiction. And what we're dealing with now is a lot of fiction. They're taking 0.01% of the incidents nationally and demonizing 850,000 police officers nationwide, and that needs to stop. And this is a tale of times where you get these progressive mayors and these politicians who want you to look at this boogeyman and say, you need me to protect you from that boogeyman, because it shields them from what they're not doing. They're not dealing with the inner city issues they have. They're not dealing with education. They're not dealing with homelessness, jobs. They're not dealing with the real issues that stem crime. And they're using your police and this anti-police momentum as rhetoric to shield themselves for their inadequacies as a political leader.
Thank you, Rob. We appreciate you. Cully, thank you both.